Another Thunder Thursday on News OK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, here with most of our Thunder coverage team, starting with, in the newsroom, 9000 North Broadway. Just below me is columnist Jenny Carlson. Joining her at a desk adjacent, columnist Barry Trammell. And one half of the newsroom's Employee of the Month tandem from his home in Northwest Oklahoma City, Thunder beat writer Darnell Mayberry.
Yes.
Thunder Thursdays are brought to you by our good friends at Wheeler Chevrolet. Take that drive down I-40, save yourself some time and money. Darnell, first things first, how are you going to arrange that parking spot that you guys have won for the next month?
Well, this is, I believe, my 9th year at the Oklahoman. This is Anthony Slater's first year, so I think it should go to me.
Who did the voting on this? The same people that voted on all NBA defense?
I think they're quite deserving, especially after the grind all of you guys have been through. We've shifted, of course, now into postseason gear. The Thunder's got its feet up on the handlebars, watching the Heat and Spurs, thinking about the NBA draft, thinking about free agency and the trade market. And along comes our good friend Darnell with 13 possibilities for the Thunder on how they could use the trade exception. Guys, I want to get your feedback. Darnell posted that yesterday on News OK. There's some interesting topics there. Barry, off that shopping list that Darnell put out, what most intrigues you? Who should they go after?
Well, I think Iman Shumpert is what is the one that intrigues me the most. After RFD educated me that the trade exception for Aaron Aflalo won't work. So Noah Aflalo, I'm going to go to the Shumpert camp. I think you got to get if you bring somebody in, they got to be a defender. So I think he's the guy that probably with the most promise that you could turn into a decent offensive player rather than some of those shooters trying to get them to play defense.
Darnell, what is it about Iman Shumpert that keeps popping up? There was reports that the Thunder was trying to acquire him at this trade deadline. What do you know about that, and why is the interest in him persisting?
Well, a couple things. One, on the Knicks' part, they don't have much talent there, and they're trying to upgrade their roster and get improvements to that team. So to do so, they're thinking that maybe in a deep draft, a first-round pick, which they don't have. They don't have any picks in this year's draft. They feel like if they can get in the draft this year, maybe they can get some talent. I think the ship has sailed on Iman Shumpert there. He's had 3 straight down years after a promising rookie season. And for the Thunder's perspective, he's only 24 years old. He's athletic. He can do a lot of things. He's kind of versatile. But he's really a defensive-minded player who can do some things offensively. The Thunder has 2 first-round draft picks. They don't need both of them with such a stacked roster. So it fits in so many different ways. He kind of fits the culture that Sam Presti's trying to create here. And I think that's why it just won't go away because of how much sense it makes for both teams.
Jenny, does Iman Shumpert sound like Thabo Sefolosha 2.0 to you?
Well, that wouldn't be a bad thing, would it? I was interested in several of the names that Darnell threw out there. I mean, a guy like a Randy Foye I thought was an interesting one that Darnell didn't rule out, said he wouldn't be surprised if that happened, and I thought that was really interesting. Corey Brewer was also another name that stood out to me. I think both of those guys, Darnell, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think both those guys might have been a little bit more expensive than you're looking at Shumpert potentially being, but definitely some interesting names for sure. And I think that if they can get some guys or get a guy that could evolve and develop, why not? I mean, Thabo Sefolosha wasn't really a known commodity when they got him, and he became what he became. So I think there's a lot of possibility out there just because they have a tendency to really be able to develop guys.
Hey, I like Corey Brewer too.
What do you like about him?
I like the fact that he guards people, including Kevin Durant on occasion. So I think he's just a high-energy defensive guy, and he's not a great shooter. In fact, he's a bad shooter, but he does get hot, and he plays with a lot of confidence. I like Brewer.
Let's shift gears back to Darnell about Corey Brewer. Darnell, does he Do you think he fits the Thunder as far as also his college pedigree coming from a national championship program? How's that fit?
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned it a lot. Sam Presti has gone after guys with who've come from these high majors programs, Texas, UCLA, Georgetown, with going back to Jeff Green. So he's gone after guys with this a certain pedigree that come from colleges that have a winning track record. So obviously Corey Brewer winning a national championship with Al Horford, Joakim Noah, and those guys fits that bill. But, you know, he does things that this team needs, as Barry pointed out. He could slide in right into, if Thabo Sefolosha leaves, which we all expect at this point, he could slide right into that defensive stopper position at the 2 guard and also maybe give you some three-point shooting. He actually shot worse from three-point range than Thabo Sefolosha this season, which is a concern because Thabo had a really rough year from that distance. But, you know, he's only 27, maybe 28, but he's not older by any means. So you can still work with him and develop him. He's still got a bright future, and you can hope that he becomes more of a three-point shooter as time goes on. But I like him. You know, I'm with Barry. I think he could be a really good fit for this Thunder team.
Barry, you mentioned how Darnell educated you. I think that was another good service that he provided with this thing on the trade exception. A hard thing to understand.
And worthy of his Employee of the Month award, by the way.
There he goes. I mean, it comes out, and there it is. Barry, let me ask you this, though. He seems to be popping our balloon. About a couple weeks ago, we sat around and talked about off-season possibilities. We're talking about Trevor Ariza. We were talking about, you know, the UCLA flash, Aaron Aflalo. It seems like those things aren't going to happen. Why?
Well, Flalo is under contract. He plays for the Orlando Magic. The only way you can get him is via trade. The only way you can afford him is he makes too much for the $6.6 million trade exemption. So you got to pay. You got to send as much salary, virtually as much, to Orlando, which means you'd have to trade Kendrick Perkins. I think is the only way to do it. And I assume the Magic are not going to make that trade. So. You know, I just think Aflalo is probably just off limits now. So Ariza is a free agent. So you might, you know, if you want to get into a bidding war, you could go after a free agent, but it's much more likely that they go after one of the guys that was on RFD's list.
Jenny, one of the complaints a lot of Thunder fans have is the fact that you had 2 defensive-minded starters, really restricting offensive potential, maybe ball movement, possibilities for the offense. A lot of these guys really fall into a lot of the guys that really sort of sound like the Thunder, Iman Shumpert, Corey Brewer, even Aaron Aflalo, are primarily defensive folks. From what I listen to on the radio, Barry's buddies that are on the afternoon, they sound like they would march on the Chesapeake Energy Arena with pitchforks if Iman Shumpert or somebody like that was the guy they went after. Is there a problem with the Thunder needing more offense at that spot?
Well, I mean, would you prefer to have somebody there who can make those shots when given the chance? Sure, but you don't have to have a great offensive player there to get ball movement. I mean, the ball movement is about being a good passer, having good court vision, and those sorts of things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that a guy has to be a dead eye to help with ball movement and offensive flow at that position. Now, I think, you know, if some of these guys, you might find that develops some as they go along. But, you know, I think to find guys in the salary range that they're sort of looking at, finding a great two-way guy who's a really good defender and a really good offensive player, I mean, I think that's going to be tough. And I think, too, you got to remember who you're out there with. Do you want that other guy taking shots away from Durant and Westbrook and Ibaka? I mean, I think there's got to be some sort of balance there that you can have a good offensive guy who's maybe not all about shooting and volume and that sort of thing. I think that's got to be I mean, again, who do you want shots? Where do you want shots going up? I would think you'd want Durant, Westbrook, and Ibaka to be shooting.
Darnell, you totally popped my bubble. I was thinking Gary Neal. I sort of like the idea, the man from Towson showing up here in Oklahoma City, a guy who can shoot it. His salary isn't prohibitive. You said you doubt it. Why?
He's not really a starter. I think if they're going to use that trade exception, which is $6.6 million, that's significant. I think they're going to try to go out there and get a starting caliber two guard with that, and not just a bit player. So for me, I think that Gary Neal is just more of a specialist, sort of a guy who can come off the bench and give you some perimeter shooting. I don't really think that that's sort of their target, and it doesn't really make sense for Charlotte for any reason to just give him away. So especially when he was a contributor to a playoff team last year. So I just don't see that happening, but he is an option that I had to throw on the list. But at the risk of popping even more bubbles, I do feel as the reigning employee of the month that I do have to educate the people. And, we always talk about Trevor Ariza and all these other free agents. Well, the thing about it is the Thunder's over the cap right now. So being over the salary cap means you can't just go out there and get and spend a ton of money on free agents. Trevor Ariza is going to want $7, $8, $9 million a year. Thunder doesn't have that. The only things that the Thunder has at its disposal are exceptions, like this trade exception, which is a tool that they acquired in that Kevin Martin sign and trade. The mid-level exception, which is only a little under $5.5 million that you can offer a player. Trevor Ariza and those like him probably aren't going to come to Oklahoma City for $5.5 million a year. I mean, those are players like, Gary Neal's getting paid, $3.5 million. So, it's going to take a lot of sacrifice on a player's part, a player of the caliber of Trevor Ariza, to really accept that much money to come to play in Oklahoma City. I just don't think that they're going to go out there and spend all of that money that they have on a free agent. I don't think they can get a quality free agent for $5.5 million.
Barry, something not mentioned in the co-employee of the month's blog on News OK is something you've got teed up. You and I have been talking about, and it fits into this search for the next two guard for the Thunder, and that is finding the next Danny Green. Aside from the way he sliced up the Miami Heat in Game 3, what so intrigues you about Danny Green?
What intrigues me about Danny Green is that we keep talking about these two-way players, guy that can shoot and defend. Well, that's what Danny Green can do. He can score. He's not an all-star, but he's a solid scorer and a solid defender. And the Spurs literally found him on the scrap heap, on their own scrap heap. He was cut by the Cavaliers. He was sent to the D-League twice. He was cut by the Spurs, brought back, and then they figured out, you know what, this guy can play. So I think the Thunder really is, they may go for Corey Brewer. They may go for an Iman Shumpert. But the truth of the matter is they know that players are out there that can play and just haven't been given the chance or haven't taken advantage of the opportunity or haven't been discovered. And there's guys out there that can play and that can fit, like a Danny Green, and I think the Thunder will be in the market for somebody like that.
Hey, the reigning employee of the month has to educate the people once more. Permission to speak, Mike Sherman.
Go right ahead, co-employee of the month.
Do I have to put the co-employee
of the month? It's a co-deal. You know what? We can actually remove the co if Anthony Slater skips one more Google Hangout. If he skips one more, then I'm just giving you unfettered employee of the month.
Since he's not here, I'm unfettered. I'm the employee of the month. The reigning employee of the month has to educate the people. And as the reigning employee of the month, I don't think we can look at teams like the Spurs and the personnel that they put into their lineup and say, hey, that'll work for the Thunder. I think it's all about the system that San Antonio runs. So, Mike, I know you're interested in Boris Diaw. Why can't the Thunder go after him? I don't think Boris Diaw would be the same player in Oklahoma City as he would be with the Spurs because the system that they run is tailored for him. It's not tailored for him, but it fits his game and what he does well. The Thunder is not going to put the ball in Boris Diaw's hands. Danny Green, he knows that he can't, he doesn't have shots just designed for Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Tim Duncan always, like the Thunder does with Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. Danny Green knows that if he gets the ball, he's free to shoot it. That's how they play down in San Antonio. So I don't think we can look at those guys and say, hey, the Spurs found a guy off the street. Maybe the Thunder can do it and plug them in and have the same success. It doesn't work that way. The Spurs system puts them in a position to succeed, and the Thunder doesn't have nearly the same system that the Spurs run down in San Antonio.
I think you overrate the San Antonio system, RFD.
I think you're not watching the NBA Finals, Barry Trammell.
Well, I love the Spurs. They're a great team. They haven't won an NBA title in 7 years.
They got 4 of them.
They may win all in 07 or earlier. If their system's so great, why didn't they win last year? If their system's so great, why didn't they get past Memphis in the first round of 2011?
Because they missed free throws, because they couldn't get a defensive rebound. Things happen. We talk about little plays that make or break a championship team. But that doesn't mean it's an indictment on the system.
The Spurs have a great system, but it's not just because of when the Thunder doesn't win, it's an indictment of the system. But when the Spurs don't win, it's not it's just circumstance. I think Danny Green could play well for almost any team in the league.
Why didn't he in Cleveland?
He didn't get time to develop. He didn't get the opportunity. I don't know why. Because it's Cleveland. Because they got a goofball owner and they switch coaches every 15 minutes.
Why didn't Boris Diaw in Charlotte? The list goes on and on with these guys. Why didn't Patty Mills in Portland?
Boris Diaw was not great, but he was a very good player in Phoenix. So Charlotte doesn't know what it's doing. But
Patty Mills in Portland. The list goes on and on for players that the Spurs have taken from other teams and turned into quality NBA players, rotation players on the Spurs.
You are the second person today that is basically calling for a statue to be built of Patty Mills. He's a nice backup point guard, but he's not any big factor in this NBA Finals. He's a backup point guard that makes a shot every once in a while.
Who else wants a statue? Because I want to hear about that.
Dude, I heard a dude on the radio today. He's some homer writer for the Spurs. I forgot his name, but he was just raving about Patty Mills and he's this and that and that. And I thought, for crying out loud, why don't we say Kawhi Leonard before we get too fired up about Patty Mills?
True.
Why don't we put that Patty Mills statue right next to Darnell's co-employee of the month parking spot?
It's not a co-employee of the month as long as Anthony Slater's not on this hangout.
All right, here's what you are, Darnell, and I'll say it in front of everybody. You're a joy killer. No Boris Diaw, no Gary Neal, no Aaron Aflalo, no Trevor Ariza, no nothing. No, Danny Green can't fit. Holy smokes. Tell me.
I gave you 13 players. Of those, Gary Neal's probably not realistic. Kyle Korver's probably not realistic. They're realistic. I just don't think they'll happen. They fit underneath the trade exception, but I just don't think that they'll happen for various reasons. Atlanta, Charlotte don't have a reason to make those trades and basically not get back anything because the Thunder's not willing to give out anything for those quality of players. I mean, if they're going to give out something, they're going to get more than Gary Neal or Kyle Korver. But I gave you 11 other players that you could take your pick from. How about Dion Waiters? He do anything for you?
If we keep doing this, you're going to be down to 7 players. It was 13 when we started 5 minutes ago. Now it's 11.
Hey, RFD, I don't know. Is Dion Waiters, can he guard people?
Yeah, I mean, probably not. We haven't seen enough evidence. Cleveland's been irrelevant, so we haven't seen it on a big enough stage. But I don't think he's the best defender. He's a little undersized, 6'4", to play the 2 guard. But, I mean, he's explosive. He's athletic. He'll definitely give you a chance. If we're talking about sticking 6'3" Reggie Jackson out there at shooting guard who can't play defense, why not take a chance on Dion Waiters, who's, I think, probably a better offensive player than Reggie Jackson. Not as in control, but he does things more naturally than Reggie does offensively.
One more question about the gang of 13 you presented, and then we'll go to Jenny to start about your grades. But first, you might be the world's foremost authority on Randy Foye. It's possible. Can he guard anybody?
Me? I'm the world's foremost authority on Randy Foye? How did that happen?
Well, the Wizards is how it happened.
Somebody's got to be.
One of the worst trades in NBA history, by the way, which Martell Webster, we haven't talked about him. He plays for the Wizards. They might not need him because Ernie Grunfeld botched the draft last year, took Otto Porter over Nerlens Noel. Does Martell Webster do anything for you?
No.
More than Otto Porter. How about Randy Foye? There's an experienced guy, came from a good college system at Villanova. They had a heck of a team. Kyle Lowry, I believe, Randy Foye, and another guy who I can't remember. Randy Foye's been in the league a long time. Could he fit?
I think he could fit in certain ways. I mean, he'd give you that shooter that you're looking for at that spot, but he wouldn't give you that defensive player. He's not going to guard anybody, especially not to the level Thabo Sefolosha did, or other guys we're talking about, like a Corey Brewer and those type of guys. So, I don't think that they do it just because of his defense, but if they're looking for a cheap or inexpensive option, he could be in the plans. He's only making $3 million, and that fits perfectly in the Thunder's salary cap and financial picture. But I just, his defense is a big question mark, but he's an experienced guy who can make big shots.
About Martell Webster, 3 years, $17 million for a guy that's just never quite done it. Doesn't seem like a Thunder player. Jenny, let's shift gears and go to the grades. Darnell and Anthony are on one of my most favorite parts of the year, in which every day on News OK and every day in the Oklahoman, they give us a package on every Thunder player. We've seen Hasheem Thabeet, Derek Fisher, Russell Westbrook, and today Darnell decides to come down on Caron Butler. What do you say about Darnell's grades so far?
Well, I mean, I think it's within. I mean, Barry and I both do grades on occasion, and it's not always easy. I mean, you see things that other people might not, or you miss things that other people might see, and so it's not necessarily easy. By the way, I think that this series is actually why Darnell and AC are getting the Employee of the Month, because to grade Hasheem Thabeet, hello, this is like above and beyond anything that I think Darnell and AC deserve at this point. So, but yeah, I mean, it's always tough. But I don't know. I thought the grades today were fairly okay. I mean, I thought Caron Butler was good in the regular season and didn't come to play when we thought he would be his best, which was the postseason. And I thought the grades reflected that. Was there something I missed?
How about it, Barry? How about Darnell's grades so far?
My only problem with the grade was, who was it? It had to be a young person early in the series. We graded somebody on their future.
Jeremy Lamb? He's done Jeremy Lamb.
Maybe it's Jerry. I don't know. I don't know how you grade anybody on what they're going to do or what you think they're going to do. So it might have been AC that did that instead of RFD. But I didn't have any big problem. I don't like it when anybody does a plus minus. So that's my recommendation for the rest of the series. No plus minus. I don't think RFD's done it. I think AC has. Must be a California thing.
Darnell, whose idea was it to assign grades to Hasheem Thabeet?
I think it was you, big fella.
Here's my question. How come his movie going doesn't make any of the report card? I'm told that if you sit behind him at Quail Springs Movie Theater, he's a D- all the way.
He should be automatically relegated to the back of the theater if he's going to see movies. At 7'3", he should not be sitting in front of anyone. I didn't know he was a movie buff going down to Harkins Bricktown, but you know how hard it is to come up with 5 categories to grade Hasheem Thabeet on when he played in about 20-something games this season? That was tough.
Darnell, you should get the parking spot just because of that.
Hey, they just sent out, someone just emailed me. Here's how we're going to do the parking spot. I'm going to get it June 16th through June 27th. Slater has it from June 30th to July 18th. So someone figured this whole thing out and saved us an arm wrestling contest.
Arm wrestling aside, the grades for Caron Butler really came down on him it seems like he just couldn't.
Mike, you didn't reply to my tweet. Did I break your heart with my grades? I know you love Caron Butler.
Well, I did until he skipped the exit interviews and shot 32% in the playoffs. I got to fess up on that, Darnell. But what's ahead? Today is Reggie Jackson. Kevin Durant's coming up. Can you give us any sneak preview of some of the grades that are coming up?
Reggie Jackson, Slater and I are alternating in this series. So I did Caron Butler today. He's doing Reggie Jackson tomorrow. I think I got Perry Jones for the next day, and I don't know who he has. And then I got Kendrick Perkins for the following day. So, we're trotting these guys out there. No really real order, but I think Reggie Jackson had a great season. Barry's answering some of these roundtable questions, all of these roundtable questions, so we appreciate that from Barry. But I think he had a pretty good season. It was an eventful season. He was bounced in and out of the lineup as starting point guard, six man, ended the season as a starting shooting guard. So I think he got a lot of really good experience, and I think you got to grade him well. He saved their season. They could have lost in the first round if not for Reggie Jackson in Game 4 against Memphis. So, I think you're going to have to grade him well. The Kendrick Perkins grades are going to be a talker. I can guarantee you that.
Barry, get ready on the radio for that. Speaking of talkers, let's talk about the Spurs Heat. Barry, one day after the Spurs go on a 2-1 lead in the series, out comes a story out of Miami that it's time for Super Friends to expand. LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and now Carmelo Anthony. How does that sound to you for the Heat in the future?
It'll sound even better when they get Dwight Howard to man the middle, and then they'd have them a good squad. A bunch of 30-year-old guys going downhill quick, and LeBron having to carry the whole bunch of them. Seems like a silly thing to me. If you could play with two basketballs, it might work, but you can only play with one. So I think that's just talk, and I think it's nonsense.
Jenny, what do you make of that? Is it something where this is somebody trying to say the way to beat the Spurs and win titles in this day and age is to just outscore everybody?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think when you see the Spurs and the way they played in the first half, when they really ran away with that game the other night. I mean, let's be honest, there are not a lot of NBA games that get decided before halftime, and that one essentially was. I mean, the Heat was playing such a game of catch-up after the way they got throttled defensively in the first half that they had no hope. But you want to go out and get an offensive-minded guy who wants to shoot 30 times a game? I mean, to me, that's the product of people that aren't really thinking about building a team around concepts that actually make sense. I mean, clearly the Heat have a lot of offensive talent, and, would another shooter benefit them on the offensive end? Probably, but on the defensive end, I mean, are they still going to give up, 71 in the first half? I don't, to me, that just smacks of people, wanting to build, all-star teams in the regular season and the playoffs. I mean, it just ultimately doesn't work, and it can't work with the salary cap the way it is for the most part. I mean, you got to have guys that are going to get out there and play some defense and not want to shoot the ball all the time, so your guys who do want to shoot it all the time get a chance to.
But Darnell, based on the reporting by Mark Stein and your friend Brian Windhorst from ESPN, it sounds like it could work under the salary cap, and most of all, it sounds like the guy who made the Los Angeles Showtime Lakers play defense, the guy who brought the defensive culture back to the Garden and the Knicks, the guy who made Miami Heat relevant, Pat Riley, of all people, wants to do this. Are you buying it?
I'm not to the point where I'm ready to buy it, but I'm not going to write it off either. I'm not going to just put it down and walk away from it. I think it's an intriguing idea. I think if Carmelo Anthony does step onto that team, he's automatically going to be held accountable defensively, and obviously all of those guys are going to have to know that they're not going to be able to take 20 shots a game, all of them. I mean, one night it might be Melo, one night it might be LeBron, the next night it might be Bosh. Wade, as we see, continues to have injury problems, so he's going to have to take another back seat. He did for LeBron. He probably was going to have to do the same for Melo, and I think he'd be willing to do that if he knew that it was going to put him in a better position to continue to win championships. So all those guys are friends. I think that's why we can't rule it out. And if they're willing to sacrifice financially, it'll take a hefty sacrifice. But if they're willing, then I think they could make it work. And Pat Riley has shown that he's able to do it in the past, so he might be able to do it again in the future.
Guys, let's close with revelations from the NBA Finals. What stood out to you, what you've learned? Jenny, I'm going to start with you. Barry, I'm going to end with you. And I'm hoping you'll say what I think you're going to say about what you've learned from these NBA Finals. Jenny, start with you.
Something I've said a couple different times to people as the Thunder seasons come to an end and the Spurs continue to roll along is, we talk a lot about the Thunder wanting to follow the Spurs blueprint, if you will. And, I mean, obviously we don't know what's going to happen with Kevin Durant's contract, Russell Westbrook's contract, but I think that if you look at what the Spurs do, they've kept that core together, which we've talked about. But really, the key is, do they have years where they've got the surrounding pieces? Lots of times, young guys are developing that haven't yet reached a point where they're ready to get that big contract. Does it all kind of convalesce together, and suddenly you've got a championship team. Right now, and Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green, we could go on down the list of guys that are sort of, coming into the meat of their careers, and it's all come together and it's working out great. Now, does that mean they're going to win? I don't know. I think it does, but I think that that's sort of a sign for Thunder fans of what the Thunder would like to do, is to keep that core together, build around it with young guys, and as those guys sort of come to a point where maybe you can't keep them all, but they're all coming into a great time in their careers together, then you can win a championship. Is that wishful thinking, hopeful thinking? If you're a Thunder fan, maybe, but I think it sort of follows in that blueprint that it can be done with a core and with young guys that maybe are a little bit more unheralded.
Darnell, 3 games of NBA Finals. What are you pulling out there that's relevant and meaningful?
I'd just like to answer for Barry. Barry has learned that the Spurs system is overrated. That's what he's learned.
I'm not asking you what he learned. I'm asking you what you learned.
I learned that LeBron James needs help. And who would have thought that we would have basically even said that 4 years ago? I mean, when they teamed up and he said not 5, not 6, not 7, we all thought, hey, this is a super team. They're going to come together. Nobody's going to be able to beat them. People were talking about them going 82-0. Now all of a sudden, Mario Chalmers looks dead in the water. Norris Cole's been absolutely horrific in this series. Dwayne Wade's been inconsistent. Chris Bosh has played well, but you're seeing LeBron James really struggle. The Heat struggle because LeBron James is the only one who's actually going out there and playing consistently well every night. He struggled in Game 3 a little bit, but you got to give credit to Kawhi Leonard for that. But, LeBron James needs some help, and I don't think we ever would have thought that we would say this 4 years ago when they teamed up.
Barry, before you start, isn't it possible that he just needs to remember that Chris Bosh is on his team if he wants some help? Seems to be standing over there waiting for somebody to call his number.
I think he touched the ball 12 times in Game 3. 4 shots, 12 touches.
That's not a lot. What's your lesson from 3 games, Barry?
You mean other than the fact that if Tim Duncan had gone to Boston in 1997, he'd have never been heard from again, since he would not have been able to prosper in the vaunted Spurs system?
Be nice. He's the employee of the month.
From what I understand. I don't hear. What I understand is I think we ought to get off the Thunder's back. Thunder, you lose a series like they did to the Spurs, 6 games, and you say, well, what's wrong with the Thunder? What's wrong with the Thunder? What's wrong with the Thunder? And then you see the Heat sort of struggle in a similar fashion to try to deal with that San Antonio squad. And you say, hey, maybe it wasn't the Thunder's demise. Maybe it's just San Antonio's excellence in that fabulous system of theirs.
I heard you say that on the radio, Barry. I completely disagree.
I was thinking about you when I said it, and I knew you were going to disagree.
I completely disagree. If Miami was up 2-1 right now, would we say, oh, we should get off the Pacers back? The Heat are just that good? No, that makes no sense at all. The Thunder has its own issues that have nothing to do with how well the Spurs played in that series. That makes no sense.
I've got a proposal for next week's hangout. Barry, go to work on this. Think of a title or an honor we can give to Darnell. Get him all fired up. Something of the month, of the week, whatever it is. And boy, step back and watch the fireworks. What a grand old time.
Let's make him second team All-NBA defense.
That's all for this edition of the Thunder Thursday on News OK Live, but you can stay with the best coverage team everywhere, every day at News OK and every morning in the Oklahoma. And again, Thunder Thursdays are brought to you by our good friends at Wheeler Chevrolet. Take that drive down I-40, save yourself some time and money.